welcome to everyone here. It's a real privilege and honor to be with you for this week. I know you've set aside considerable time. We'll try to make it as valuable to you as we can. I'm Nathaniel Osgood. I'm going to be your host and instructor for this boot camp. I thought that I'd start by giving a little bit of an overview of what's expected and where we might be going, bearing in mind that a lot of that is actually subject to shaping by you in terms of hearing feedback, hearing interest expressed, etc. And I want to begin by thanking those of you who have filled out the survey, which I circulated prior to this point, because it was instrumental in shaping my sense of what might make for a fruitful combination of materials. But I look forward to further feedback and updates and expressions of interest as the camp goes on, so I can further shape the material. The goals here of this boot camp are several-fold, and these different goals reflect different subsets of participants. Time was, if I go back quite a few years, our boot camps were designed to try to produce modelers who had a certain degree of proficiency in engaging with broader teams. And increasingly what we're seeking to do is to educate teams, people who will occupy very different positions within modeling groups. And as a result, we're trying to address different crowds within the same boot camp. One of the most basic things is give a sense of the capabilities, strengths, and limitations of system science methods and agent-based modeling in particular. But also to provide at least a minimum across the team so that they're comfortable running, understanding, and performing small modifications to ABMs. We are also helping for people who are really keen on building models to provide a sense of hands-on familiarity with these models and enough familiarity with their basics and what's called Java programming, a programming language, to navigate and actually build models, get started building models, recognizing that they're not going to reach full proficiency within one boot camp alone. Finally, give some sense of the theory and practice related to building hybrid models, which I know is an area that's been expressed as of considerable interest to this group. So a bit of notes on the schedule. Each day the schedule incorporates some time for project work and discussion periods for questions and hands-on lectures. So I'm going to try to take some time, because I know some people here are working on projects, to be able to talk with people about their projects so that I can give some advice so that myself and a TA will be able to help out with any technical issues associated with those projects. That won't be the most time set aside of each day, but it will be an important component, and depending on the feedback we get, we may expand that. The schedule is going to evolve fairly significantly during the boot camp based on my observation of progress, sort of what you find readily accessible, what you find challenging, and your comments. So again, please come forward with comments regarding the material so that I can shape things further. I am going to be aspiring to make screencast recordings of these sessions, subject to anyone's concerns about that. And I've created a link here where I'm going to be posting these videos. I will try to do so during the day, so if you miss a morning session, you want to catch up on it in the afternoon, you'll be able to do so. But sometimes I'm not able to do that by the end of the boot camp, and I'll have to continue that evening or the next morning. So I'm going to try to be updating those, but if you can't find the material, feel free to ask for what you're looking for. Now, this is probably the most important slide of this deck. I've posted a set of materials for this course, which are going to be important immediately following these introductory remarks. And the link for it, the URL is given there at the top, okay? And I'd like people right now to give that URL a try. We're going to be going through and discussing a bit of the material on there to make sure that you're aware of what it brings to the table. So if you could open this up, it's tinyurl.com/CBM Bootcamp Materials 2016.
And it's in an email I sent yesterday.
Okay. That is going to have these slides recursively. It's also going to have a set of other materials that will be very central to delivering this boot camp. And having done that, I will go and call that out myself here. I will also note that we have a set of those course videos, and then there's a site which is designed to help encourage discussion among multiple parties of the contents of my boot camps, this health modeling community that you may find of interest, in which I'll try to discuss during the boot camp. So this is the material that you should see. Do people see this? Okay, great. So we're going to go through one or two of these items in coming slides. One is this preliminary schedule, and it is preliminary. I will emphasize that it's subject to that feedback. And you'll notice that it includes, for sessions, some comments on the model that's anticipated for discussion, and some discussions of the lessons learned. It's helpful to kind of go back to this document to reflect on some higher level points of learning that go beyond all the details of what will be seen. And while I'll try to stress certain points, occasionally I'll neglect some or won't place them up as much as I should. So these lessons associated with each of these, if you want to get a high-level sense of what some of the take-homes are, you might want to check those out. Okay. In addition to that, I have draft lecture slides here, and these two will be evolving. But in here, you'll find a couple dozen slide decks. Now, I probably won't have a chance to go through all of these. There are some on here that that we might be concentrating on quite a lot, and others which we never get to. But I'm hoping that these will be useful to you in your sort of learning this sort of modeling. And if you have questions on particular slides, please, please bring those forwards, and I can answer questions on those, even if I'm not otherwise going to cover them. A further item is the list that's currently empty. As I noted, it will be filled in. This reference cards, I thought actually I have not actually uploaded those yet. I will try to do so during the first break, but these include references for common AnyLogic functions and tasks. So particularly if you're starting out in AnyLogic and you want to know how certain things are done, there's a sort of index for common tasks. For those who are more familiar with AnyLogic, who develop that familiarity, this list of AnyLogic functions is kind of a handy cheat sheet for pursuing questions about how do I do this and do that at a smaller, finer-grained level. For those who are newer to system science, I also have a set of slides on that motivate use of system science. What are certain hallmarks of a system which would make you think about use of ABM, for example? And then finally, some step-by-step tutorials. Now, these tutorials are coded in terms of their level of complexity that they involve, and they are in a structured form. So you can make your way through this by following these kind of dependency structures. So following this, which we'll actually be undertaking in just a few minutes, and then going on to later ones. I will try to post a further set of sort of challenge problems, which are more open-ended, in which challenge you with respect to certain modeling tasks, which will help build skills further. Okay. Now, I further have posted on this site a key resource, and it's one that traditionally I haven't tended to emphasize explicitly in my remarks. I just more sort of provide them as a side benefit, but I want to highlight them now. And that's in this area called AnyLogic 7 examples. And if you go into there's something called, there's two classifications: particular interest and secondary of secondary interest. So again, AnyLogic examples, and then there's two components: secondary relevance, particular interest. I have chosen these particular interest ones for this group based on the comments that I saw reflected in the feedback, and based on some discussion with Sean as well, who was very helpful for orienting me. And you'll see here that there's probably between 20 and 30 models. Maybe it's closer to 20 here. And they span the gamut in terms of their coverage. Not all of them are certainly about vet med issues, though some are. Others highlight more methodological factors that I think might be of interest, including many hybrid models. So I'd like to talk about these with a particular focus on some of the non-hybrid models, and then point you to some of the hybrid ones. So this one that we'll be pursuing first is this SAR agent-based model, and we're going to be going through it interactively. For those who have AnyLogic Educational or above, who are not using PLE, you can just use the built-in example, and I'll show you how to get there. On the other hand, if you're using PLE, you'll want to download this version here. Okay, it's on the site, and you want to download it, and it lives within the constraints that PLE imposes on the number of agents involved. The next one is an illustration of a model that shows how you can drive network structures within these models in a dynamic way and loading them from files. So not merely depending on AnyLogic's built-in networks, which we'll be seeing today or tomorrow, but loading things in from files as to the network structures that are desired. I know several of you have indicated interests in combinations with social network analysis, and if memory serves me, I designed this to read in from PIEC files, for example, read in social networks, and impose them on the AnyLogic model. So that might be of interest to some. This childhood infectious disease model is one that shows some features of sort of an open population with networks that evolved to reflect that, and the spread of infection within that population. There's a communicable mobility model that involves stylized agents moving around and spreading infection from one to the other via contact, which in a veterinary context might be of interest. For example, in some of our work with the San Diego Zoo, there's quite a lot of interest in spread of zoonoses within pens. There's a model that we'll probably be building off of called crowding disparities, and that shows how you can use spatial layout can be integrated together with network-based context in the context of a spread of communicable disease. Because I sometimes get questions about it, there's an example of how using compartmental models, system dynamics models, ODE models, they go by different names, we can have a subscripted model that captures heterogeneity. And then there's a model that also illustrates input and output from Excel and from text files. Some of you may be interested in that as a practical matter in terms of if you're building a sophisticated model, getting data out of it, or bringing data that involves assumptions about parameters into that model. And this model will show you how that can be done. Okay. There's extended SIR agent-based calibration. Some of you have indicated interest in learning more about calibration processes with models. We will talk about that. But there's a model that includes additional elements beyond what the built-in models in AnyLogic show that you may find of interest there. It involves calibration across not just one time series, but two time series, and it shows how they can be combined together. So some of you may find this of interest. I also know there's some interest from within this crowd in the GIS side of things, so Geographic Information Systems. And I do have a model, this one built during a boot camp in Melbourne, Australia, which involves food and physical activity environments that are GIS, embedded in a GIS context that some of you may find interesting. Spread of infection among different institutions, say buildup of pathogen exposures of individuals who bring it to a new location. If you're talking about transport of animals between multiple farms or between different sites, this might be of interest. And we'll probably be building a model like this, but if you want to get a leg up on it, or if you want to see another way it can be done or what have you, you might want to check that out. Some of you may be interested in models that incorporate multiple types of networks, contact networks, sexual networks, for example, as different constructs, or perhaps communicational networks versus needle sharing networks for spread of attitudes as well as pathogen. And there's a model that illustrates in AnyLogic how we can impose two different network structures capturing a person's context in different topologies. There's another open population model that has some nice structure, including tracing multiple generations and their linkages to each other. So parent-child relationships, so family structures are captured within this top model here. This model, hierarchical city population model, is often goes unnoticed in my when I provide these materials, but for your context it's particular relevance because this is a model which, while it focuses on cities and people within cities, it could just as well focus on farms and animals within farms. So in this case, what we have is a model which includes a hierarchical structure, and you could think of it as city and people, or farm and animals. But fundamentally, there's different networks applying at those two levels. There's different types of statistics computed at those two levels. And this sort of structure illustrates how you achieve those multiple levels within AnyLogic. Okay? So if you're interested in that sort of thing, if you're interested in the use of hierarchical linear modeling or other random effects models in the context of dynamic modeling, say comparing dynamic model results with what you might get from a random effects model, this might be of interest. There's a very articulated model of HPV transmission, including some very, very detailed modeling of some of the progression of infection, which you may find of interest. It also illustrates the use of subclassing, which is a more advanced topic I'd be glad to talk on. IEPI-based networks illustrates how you can bring together empirical data from dynamic networks, such as we collect with our sensor-based studies, and how you can impose it into AnyLogic models. And so basically it's dynamic network structures. And income and crowding-based communicable disease disparities shows relationship between some risk factors and the spread of infection. Longitudinal data on smoking history shows how we can use history information or biographical information about a participant within a study, say as modeled within our dynamic model, and we can capture that history within our dynamic model over time, so we can have sort of synthetic biographies and compare them with real-life biographies. Minimalist network ABM model with assorted network dynamics is a model that provides assorted network structures of a sort that aren't built into AnyLogic, but where you can get assortivity of people according to age or sex or other characteristics in a quite flexible way. Although the focus of this is human health, it could readily be adapted to the veterinary context. And the assortive network structure is a very general one that's used there. There's a flocking model for anyone interested in kind of models of flocking behavior within animal communities, and a very simple SIR model thrown in there with networks. Some models on the impact of vaccination in the context of heterogeneous population. Two different models for this, and I believe one of them may incorporate a hybrid context as well, where we have people presenting for care in clinics. So I'd highlight these as being of particular interest, but there's one other class that from people's expressed interest would be of particular concern, and that is reflected in this folder called hybrid models. And I've just provided you a SWAC of hybrid models here, which illustrate multiple types of hybridization within AnyLogic for multiple purposes. And quite a few of these do have some linkage to the interests here. For example, some are of zoonoses, like this West Nile virus model. Others also include multi-level structures, such as this anemia in agents model. And others yet have very general patterns associated with them that I'll be talking about in a hybrid context, such as this budding hybrid model or this health economics model. So if you're dealing with health economic concerns or economics of veterinary care, that one may be of interest. So these are some, in this model, CTL state variable, this will illustrate some features associated with immunoepidemiological models where you have simulation of immune dynamics within an individual within an epidemiologic context. So one could imagine simulating how there's viral dynamics within a person that are germane to the likelihood of that being spread to others. I wanted to make you aware of these resources because they often go underappreciated within an environment, because some of them, a subset of them that I've tried to highlight, are of more direct relevance to your work. Myself or others in my group, including my TA Kurt, who will be here starting tomorrow, can help walk you through how these models work and talk about how they could be adapted to your context, okay? So with that resource in mind, we're going to be coming back to some of those models to open them up in coming minutes. Okay, now I will have a teaching assistant. Kurt Kruger is his name, and some who have been up to Saskatoon may remember him. Kurt was planning to join me starting today, but he developed a bad case of the flu last week, as did much of his family, and as a result, we've delayed his arrival by a day. And what that means is today we're going to be without a TA, and so I'm going to be circulating myself and working with you a bit more slowly. Kurt, however, is going to be a key person throughout this boot camp for several reasons. And he's going to be able to circulate to help you with particular problems you encounter with some of the exercises, but can also talk about some of these example models, can brainstorm with you about applications, consult on modeling process. He's going to give some guest lectures and talk about some of the trade-offs with other sorts of techniques, including statistical models. So please take advantage of Kurt's time here. Often my throat will be burnt out and I'll need to rest, but Kurt will be able to circulate with youthful vigor. Okay, so please make sure that you get a chance to talk with him and bring up questions with him. He can also ferry questions back to me that require additional input. Okay, so those were just some overviews of some of the resources and some of what's expected. Any questions before we dive into some modeling? Questions?
You need
Yes.
to have this already loaded. I'm having an issue with the license key.
Okay, so is it asking for a key?
It's saying that the key that was emailed to me is in the wrong formats.
Okay.
I'll send you a different one.
Okay, so I'm trying to interpolate here. Sean, did you send along a key for AnyLogic Educational?
Yeah.
Oh, you did. Okay. So, so it sounds like you've installed PLE. The key was actually for educational. So there's two options. One thing is in PLE you can actually say request a key,
Okay.
and that will be sent to you via an automated means that often is carried out, in my observation, within an hour's time. Alternatively, if you can find the educational version online, and I don't know if they have links to it now. Do you know?
Yes.
They do. They still have that. Okay. You could download that, and then you could immediately use the key. My apologies, I didn't know the educational key had been circulated to the group. So
Yeah.
that's
The
great.
researcher educational?
Yeah, that sounds. Is it researcher / educational?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And that's the one you've installed too, right now.
Oh, I've got PLE on this one. I just worked out. I'm got education on this one. I've got PLE. The computer I mostly use is in my lab,
Okay.
which has education.
Okay.
I've
Great.
got that two different things.
Great. Any other questions?
I can send you another key if you want to have an
Yeah,
educational.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions right now? Okay. So normally I would dive into an example, but it strikes me that it's a small enough group that perhaps it would be good for me to learn names around the table here, especially because I'll be my own TA today. So do we want to go around and just state your name and a little bit about your interests so I can connect some interest with faces? Do you want to start here?
Sure. I'm Kim Vanderwall. I'm a research associate in the Department of Veterinary Population Medicine. I work mostly on network modeling, so I model infectious disease spread in dynamic networks. And they're hierarchical as well with the within farm model, but I do all of that in R, and I'm kind of interested in what other tools are available and how they might compare.
Great.
Excellent. I'm Nick Fowden-Jones. I'm a postdoctoral associate here as well. My background is in community ecology, so I'm used to dealing with matrix-based permutational type statistical models. So Megan, my boss, which isn't here today, she's pushed me into different modelling attempts, and I'm now working on high-path avian influenza, trying to work out, using AnyLogic, trying to work out potential transmission mechanisms into the farm from wildland, and how it got farm to farm as well, using agent-based and systems dynamics and discrete event all at once. So I'm really interested in the hybrid models.
Great.
For sure.
Great. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Heijin, and I'm a PhD student in the School of Health. My research is on Campylobacter ecology and epidemiology in broiler chicken. So my modeling interest in modeling broiler farm and see how Campylobacter population can spread between farms and from farms to processing facilities, and then its potential impact on public health.
Great. Thanks.
I'm Irene, and I'm a PhD student. I'm modeling or trying to model environmental dissemination of antibiotic resistance genes from different point sources into the environment different ways, via birds and via water. So I'm trying to combine system dynamics from with something else.
Great.
My name is Dominic Travis. I play with modelers. I know very little about actual modeling, just enough to be dangerous in most cases. But I like to be a matchmaker for projects and techniques and teams in that sense. So I like your intro in that sense. And I also have been a part of a group that I could link to this nicely, where we tried to take the OIE and IUCN, so the National Union of Conservation Nature and OIE, and get them to talk to each other about language. And then we created kind of a manual, and one part of that is an attempt, just a very basic beginning attempt, to match your type of question with the type of platform, and so that to guide people on not only the language and the process, but how to figure out, A, if you want to be a modeler, because most people don't know what they're asking for, and B, when to ask, and then maybe which direction to go for help. So I'm really interested in the context here, and I'm involved in a lot of the people and projects here as well. So I'll be bouncing in and out because I can't get out of a bunch of stuff this week as well, so I'll apologize for that, but I'm very interested in everybody here and then how we continue this going and support kind of the creation of this idea. And I was on Tiffany's PhD committee with Randy, and
Great.
and she's technically in my lab now, so really trying to push that forward.
Fantastic. Okay.
My name is Ned. I'm a school public health master's student. Kind of interested in infectious disease transmission. I'm primarily working with Sean and Dom on MERS project that's kind of combines system dynamics and something else.
Oh.
I'm Peter. I'm a research professional in the Department of Veterinary and Biomedical Sciences, and we use simulation to assess different surveillance protocols for detecting highly pathogenic avian influenza.
And, Sean can everyone in the car. But I work with Nick and with Tiffany and with Dom. Dom on thinking about what things we could do, and with them on actually taking the modeling concepts into final application.
Great.
Yeah, I would say that most of us are probably interested in the ability to ask most of the kinds of questions that you covered on the slide before. Not that that's, but
Yeah.
this is our world in terms of, so we are a group who is interested in our kind of ecosystem health world here at applying this on so many different levels.
Right.
So I don't think you'll go astray. It'd be a question of containing things in terms of this group.
Yeah, that's very helpful, and it's what is particularly helpful for me to hear this overview in people's particular interests is to link it in with a little bit of comments on my background and sort of where I'm coming from. So we do work which is at the confluence of sort of I'd say 4 major thrusts. One of them is dynamic modeling, and I've been doing that for over a quarter century. So I started my first agent-based modeling back in 1990, and when it was a very different world for agent-based modeling, and did system dynamics also for somewhere over 20 years. So for much of that time, I was building system dynamics models and agent-based models, I view myself as a little bit unusual in the sense that there's a lot of people who are solely in one camp or the other there, and I very assiduously have sought to cross-fertilize and bridge those camps, sometimes with discomfort to each of those camps because they want to claim me as their own. But it's been a persistent conviction of mine that multiple lenses are extremely important and are useful and can be fruitfully combined within a given project. And so system science has been, or whatever one wants to call it, complexity science, dynamic modeling, has been a big feature of, it's been probably my primary tool that I've used over these years. But increasingly we've combined it with elements of data science, and that includes machine learning and large-scale electronic data collection. So I spend a lot of time these days actually shaping studies that gather the sort of information that can be directly used for parameterizing these sort of models. That can fill in the key gaps within our modeling that have traditionally been left open by the literature. And part of that is use of machine learning techniques as well. So I do a lot of combination of data science with modeling. One component of that I'm increasingly used is combination of advanced machine learning techniques, things like MCMC and particle filtering with dynamic models. And this can allow for models that are self-correcting, that when new pieces of data come in, they learn from that data better, create better estimates of their parameter values to be more reliable down the road. And in the case of emerging infectious diseases or zoonoses, this can be particularly valuable because there's often a dearth of information available on parameter values early on, but as the outbreak continues or as there's continued observations, new data comes in which can allow that model to become more refined and to learn from these observations so it can project forward with greater confidence. So much of the work that I do with dynamic models is informing policymakers, and I work very closely with several provincial governments in Canada and some with the Public Health Agency of Canada to try to advise on policy relevant questions, and sometimes at an operational level. The other components of my work are methodological, such as in building up tools. So in addition to using tools like AnyLogic, we build tools that help us undertake new types of modeling. An example would be tools to combine decision analysis on the one hand with dynamic modeling on the other. In the context of when you're dealing with something like West Nile infection, where from year to year there can be huge differences in the burden of West Nile due to the vagaries of weather, rainfall, temperature, etc. Trying to use decision analysis to capture those uncertainties together with modeling to capture the complexities of the situation to make better decisions in an adaptive fashion based on observations from the environment concerning weather to this point, trying to plan policy that's not prescriptive in a fixed sense, but adaptive to the context. So we do a lot of tool building, and some of our tools are designed to help AnyLogic be even more effective. For example, working together with R more effectively. So we can automagically, as it were, export from AnyLogic into R the out results of data gleaned from AnyLogic, or we can do automatic tracing and logging on our models so that we can flip on a switch and have it print out every time an agent has changed state or sent a message, etc. So we have tools that we've built up that are quite nice for pursuing our modeling. I would say that within these areas, a lot of the work I do has strong overlap with what people have expressed here. So one thing I heard is using simulation to enhance surveillance. That's an area which is, I think, underappreciated in the surveillance world, but very important for our type of investigation. So trying to use modeling of a situation, dynamic models, to shape our sense of which metrics are most effective for example, classifying an individual or serving as proxies for some underlying condition. These are things we can pursue with the model and using it to shape study design and to shape the selection of statistical measures. Another thing is use of it together with social network analysis. And I'm a huge R user, so I spend a large fraction of my time working with R. And I can speak to some of the trade-offs between these techniques, some of the ways in which they can work together effectively that might be of interest. I also have colleagues working very much in the AMR context, and I was mentioning to Sean on the way over that probably I should trot out some models which are research models, which combine elements of phylogenetic evolution and particularly in the context of AMR, antimicrobial resistance, with dynamic modeling. And using dynamic models there potentially to shape sort of our understanding of molecular epidemiology, et cetera. So that's an area where we also work. In terms of, this is an infectious disease crowd largely, and in terms of infectious disease, I've done work variously in H1N1, TB, various types of STIs, gonorrhea, chlamydia, HPV. Also done quite a lot of work with some other aspects of flu, more seasonal flu and immunoepidemiology there, and some zoonoses like West Nile virus, chronic wasting disease, and probably forgetting 2 or 3 other types of pathogens. But we have very active research programs in several of these areas going on. And increasingly, we are working on a cross-disciplinary basis with those in the biological sciences from a molecular epi perspective. Okay, so those are some comments about my background, and Kurt, who will be joining us, also brings some unique features to the table, including his work to combine modeling with discrete choice theory and modeling of preferences. More common on a human, more relevant on a human health context, but also potential relevance. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, with that finished, what I'd like to do is to dive into an example. And this example is designed to give you some first exposure to AnyLogic, but also to help gain an appreciation for some of the features the modeling we'll be dealing with. So to this end, I would like to open up a model that will serve as our initial exercise. Now, depending on which version of AnyLogic you're using, the details of what we'll be doing here are different. So for those people who are using AnyLogic PLE, what you will want to do is to go to, from the participant resources page, you will want to go to the page that's on example models, and okay, now why is this downloading these things? Okay, pardon me for just a second here. You will want to go to the resources page and download a model called SAR agent-based for PLE. So it was this model here, SAR agent-based for PLE. And to do that, you will want to go to the example models area and the thing that says of greatest relevance, or whatever name I use. Okay, SAR agent-based for PLE. For those who are using AnyLogic educational or otherwise, or professional, what you will want to do is go to the help menu here and go to example models. Okay, and for this example model, you will want to go down, and it's actually in the okay, it's in the how-to models here, over here, and if you scroll down, there should be SIR agent-based. So let's see how we do this. So help, and then you go to example models, okay? And in the example models, okay, I want this to be full screen here. Example models, you go to how-to models, and then scroll all the way down to SIR agent-based. Okay.
What if I try and turn the lights off?
Oh, that would be great,
Okay.
Dominic. Thank
Yeah,
you so
we'll
much.
see.
Yeah,
Okay enough, or is that going to be?
Yeah.
that's great. Much appreciated. Okay, so if you call up AnyLogic again, help, example models. Forgive me if I do this a little bit more slowly for people, because with the lack of a TA, I want to be sure you're following along. How to, and then you can scroll down and go to SIR agent based. Now, when you click on this, it should load in the model here, as in the left-hand side. Okay, and I'm going to transition here